The wind was blowing harder than usual that night. It whistled through the tall pine trees like a song with no end, and every gust made the old wooden cabin shake just a little. Mary stood near the window, watching as the snowflakes twirled in the air like tiny dancers. It was quiet, except for the sound of the wind and the creaking of the wood beneath her feet. Winter in the mountains was nothing new to her, but tonight felt different. It wasn't just cold. It was bone-deep cold, the kind that made the world outside disappear into a wall of white. Mary was a woman who had learned how to live alone. She had been a schoolteacher for most of her life. Years had passed since she had lost her husband, and her children were grown and living far away in the city. Her cabin was small but warm, filled with old books, photographs, and the smell of pine wood from the fire burning in the hearth. She had spent the afternoon preparing for the storm. She stacked wood by the door, checked the lanterns, and made sure the kettle was full of water. The radio had already warned everyone to stay inside. The snowstorm was expected to be one of the heaviest of the season. Mary wrapped a wool shawl around her shoulders and moved toward the fireplace. The orange light danced on the walls, making the room feel safe. She liked nights like these, quiet and still, when she could sip her tea and read an old book. She liked the peace. The world outside might be wild, but inside her cabin, everything was calm. Hours passed. The wind grew louder, almost like it was knocking at her door. The snow piled higher against the porch. Mary glanced at the clock. It was nearly midnight. She put away her book and stared at the fire, letting the soft crackling fill the silence. She didn't expect anything to happen that night, but sometimes life has its own way of surprising people. When they least expected. At first, she thought it was her imagination. A faint sound came from the door. It was soft, almost like a whisper. Then it came again. A knock. A real knock. Mary froze. No one ever came to visit her at midnight, especially in the middle of a snowstorm. For a moment, she thought about ignoring it, but the knock returned, this time a little louder, though still weak, like someone who was running out of strength. She walked slowly toward the door, her heart beating faster than usual. She pressed her ear against the wood. The wind roared, but beneath it, she heard breathing. Someone was outside. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice a little shaky. No one answered at first. Then a faint, tired voice replied, "Please, help." Without thinking, she unlatched the door and pulled it open. The wind rushed in, cold and sharp, almost knocking her backward. And there he was. A young man stood on her porch, covered in snow from head to toe. His hair was wet, his face pale, and his clothes, a simple military jacket, too thin for this kind of weather, were soaked. His hands were red from the cold, and his lips trembled as he tried to speak again but couldn't. His eyes met hers, and in them she saw exhaustion and fear. "Come in," she said quickly, reaching out to grab his arm before he fell. He stumbled inside, almost collapsing near the door. Mary shut the door behind him and locked it, trying to keep the cold out. She turned to look at him. He was young, maybe in his early 20s. Snow melted on the wooden floor around him, forming a small puddle. "Sit down," she said gently, guiding him toward a chair by the fire. His hands shook as he tried to remove his gloves. She took them off for him and placed them near the fire to dry. His fingers were stiff from the cold. She hurried to the kitchen, poured hot water into a cup, and handed it to him. He held it with both hands like it was the only warm thing in the world. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice rough and weak. "Drink slowly," she said. "You're frozen." He nodded, taking small sips, his body slowly relaxing. His cheeks were turning pink again, and his breathing grew steadier. Mary knelt to remove his boots, which were soaked through. She placed them near the fire as well. Then she covered him with a thick wool blanket from the couch. It was the same blanket she had used for years on cold nights. It was old but warm, and right now, he needed it more than she did. "What happened?" she finally asked. "I was on the highway," he said softly, his teeth still chattering a little. "The storm came fast. My car. It stopped. I started walking. I didn't know where else to go." Mary looked at him closely. His jacket had a patch on the shoulder. He was a soldier, probably stationed at a base not far from town. He looked so young, too young to be out in a storm like this alone. His hair stuck to his forehead, and his eyes were tired but clear. "How long have you been walking?" she asked. He thought for a moment. "I don't know. A few hours, maybe. It's all white out there. I saw a light from your window. I just followed it." She nodded slowly. She could imagine it in a storm like this. The world outside felt endless. A person could walk in circles and never find their way. If he hadn't seen her light, he might not have made it much longer in that cold. "You're safe now," she said softly. "We'll wait out the storm here." He looked around her small cabin, his eyes lingering on the photographs on the wall. A younger Mary, her husband in a military uniform, to smiling children. He didn't say anything, but she saw a flicker of understanding in his eyes. He knew this place held stories. She brought him a bowl of soup she had made earlier. It wasn't much, just potatoes, carrots, and a bit of broth, but it was warm. He ate slowly at first, then faster, like someone who hadn't eaten in a long time. When he finished, he leaned back in the chair, his eyes half closed, the firelight making his face glow. "What's your name?" Mary asked. "Daniel," he replied softly. "Daniel Reed." "Well, Daniel Reed," she said with a small smile. "You picked quite a night to go for a walk." He chuckled weakly. The first real smile she'd seen from him. "I didn't plan it. I was trying to get home." "Home?" she asked. "My sister's house," he said. "She's sick. Not too far from here. I thought I could make it before the storm got bad." Mary nodded. That explained why he was on the road so late. She didn't ask for details. She could see the worry in his eyes when he mentioned his sister. Instead, she simply said, "Well, you're staying here tonight. The storm isn't stopping anytime soon." Daniel nodded, his head resting against the chair. The sound of the wind outside was loud now, like it was trying to tear the world apart. But inside, with the fire crackling and the warmth growing, it felt like a small island of safety in a wild sea. Mary went to the window and peeked outside. The snow was still falling thick and fast. She couldn't even see the road anymore. Everything was white, sky, ground, trees. She turned back to Daniel. He had closed his eyes, but he wasn't asleep. His hands gripped the cup tightly, like he needed something to hold on to. "You're going to be all right," she said softly. He opened his eyes and looked at her. "Thank you. I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't found your cabin." She didn't answer right away. She knew exactly what would have happened. The storm outside was unforgiving, but she didn't want him to think about that now. Instead, she smiled gently and said, "Well, good thing I leave the lamp on at night." For a long while, they didn't speak. The fire crackled. The wind howled. But inside the cabin, the silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was calm, safe. Daniel slowly warmed up, and his breathing evened out. His eyes followed the flames. Like he was lost in thought, Mary sat across from him, knitting quietly, though her eyes kept drifting to him. There was something familiar about the way he stared at the fire. It was the same way her husband used to look at it after coming home from long, cold days. Quiet, heavy, like the flames were the only thing that could hold their secrets. Daniel finally spoke again, his voice soft. "Your husband, was he in the army?" Mary's hands paused. She hadn't talked about him in years, not like this. She nodded slowly. "Yes, a long time ago." He nodded, understanding. "My dad was too." Something in the air shifted, soft but real. Two strangers, different ages, different lives. Yet somehow, connected by the quiet language of people who understood what it meant to wait, to worry, to hope. Mary poured him another cup of tea. He accepted it with a quiet thank you and sipped slowly. She noticed how tired he looked, like he had carried 1,000 thoughts on his shoulders long before the storm began. And she understood that kind of tiredness too. As the clock ticked past 1 in the morning, Daniel's head began to droop. His eyes closed without him even realizing it. The fire's warmth had wrapped around him like a soft blanket. Mary didn't wake him. She brought over a pillow and gently placed it behind his head, then added another blanket around his shoulders. He mumbled something in his sleep, a name, maybe his sister's, and then went still. Mary sat back in her chair, watching the snow fall through the small window. She thought about the strange way life works. One moment she had been alone, expecting a quiet night, and the next, she was sharing her home with a young soldier who had nowhere else to go. She thought about how she had once waited for her husband to come home from his own journeys. Through cold nights like this, she thought about how it felt to open the door and see someone standing there, lost but alive. The storm outside was still strong. The wind pushed against the cabin walls, but they held firm. Inside, the fire kept burning, warm and steady. Mary closed her eyes and listened. The house didn't feel so quiet anymore. There was someone breathing softly near the fire, someone who had. The morning came slowly, with a pale silver light pressing through the frosted windows. The storm had finally grown tired of its long night. The snow outside was thick and heavy, covering everything like a soft blanket. The trees were bent low under the weight, and the path to the road had completely disappeared. It was quiet now, the kind of quiet that only comes after a long night of wind and snow. Mary woke up early. She had dozed off in her chair near the fireplace, her shawl still wrapped tightly around her shoulders. The fire had turned to glowing embers, still warm but no longer dancing. The first thing she saw when she opened her eyes was Daniel, still sleeping on the couch. His face looked calmer than it had the night before. His hands were tucked under the blanket, his breathing steady. For a moment, he looked like any young man at peace, not someone who had been wandering through a storm. She moved quietly so she wouldn't wake him. She put a few more logs on the fire, and soon the soft crackling filled the room again. The warmth returned slowly, chasing away the cold that had crept in overnight. She went to the kitchen and started boiling water for tea. The smell of pine wood and warmth spread through the cabin. It was a new day, but it still felt like the world outside was wrapped in silence. As she poured the tea into a mug, she heard Daniel stir. His eyes fluttered open, and for a moment he looked confused, like he had forgotten where he was. Then he sat up, rubbing his eyes, and a faint smile appeared on his face. "Good morning," Mary said softly. He nodded, still a little sleepy. "Good morning. You slept through the storm," she said with a light laugh. "I can't believe it." He replied, "I thought I'd wake up every hour." "You must have been very tired," she said. "The storm was loud, but you didn't move once." He stretched his arms, feeling the warmth from the fire. "I guess I felt safe here," he admitted. That simple sentence touched her more than she expected. She handed him the mug of tea, and he accepted it with both hands, just like the night before. Steam rose from the cup, curling up into the air. He took a sip and let out a long breath. It was clear that after many hard hours, this warmth meant something. "I should get going soon," he said after a moment. "I need to get to my sister's house." Mary glanced out the window. The world outside was still buried in snow. "Not yet," she said gently. "The road is covered. If you try to walk now, you'll only get stuck again. Let the sun rise a little higher. The snow will soften, and maybe the plows will clear the highway." He nodded reluctantly. She could see the worry in his eyes. His sister was clearly important to him. "What's her name?" Mary asked. "Lena," he replied. "She's my younger sister. She's been sick for a while, but she's strong. I promised I'd be there before her next appointment." Mary listened carefully. The way he spoke about his sister had a quiet tenderness. It reminded her of how her own children spoke about each other when they were young. She didn't ask too many questions. Sometimes, people speak more freely when they don't feel pressured. They ate a simple breakfast. Bread with honey and hot tea. The cabin felt warm and bright now, and the tension from the night before had melted away like the frost on the window. Daniel looked more alive. His cheeks had color again, and his hands no longer shook. After breakfast, Mary pulled out a coat that had belonged to her late husband. It was thick, wool-lined, and strong, the kind of coat meant for real winters. "This might fit you," she said, holding it out. Daniel hesitated. "I can't take that. It's just for your journey," she said with a gentle smile. "And it's better than the jacket you have." I'll feel better knowing you're warm." He accepted it slowly, running his fingers over the fabric. It was old but carefully kept. He put it on, and it fit almost perfectly. It felt like a shield against the cold. "Thank you," he said sincerely. "I'll take good care of it," Mary nodded. "I know you will." For a little while, they sat together near the fire. Daniel told her stories about his time at the base, not about anything dark, just the ordinary moments, the early mornings, the drills, the friends who made him laugh. His voice grew lighter as he spoke, and Mary found herself smiling. In return, she told him about her years as a school teacher, the children she had taught, the funny things they used to say. Their stories were different, but they shared them with the same warmth. It was a quiet kind of connection. Two lives that never would have crossed paths if not for a snowstorm. And yet, it felt natural, like they had known each other longer than a single night. As the day grew brighter, Daniel stood by the window, watching the sunlight touch the snow. "I should start walking soon," he said softly. "I can't stay too long." Mary followed his gaze. The road was still not clear, but the snow on the trees sparkled like crystals. It was beautiful, but still dangerous if someone wasn't careful. She didn't want to stop him, but she also didn't want him to get lost again. "Wait a little longer," she said. "I'll make you something warm to take with you." He nodded, and she began packing a small bag, bread, apples, and a jar of soup in a tightly sealed container. She wrapped everything in cloth so it would stay warm for a while. She also gave him a wool scarf, the one her husband had always worn during winter. Daniel stared at the scarf for a long moment. "This is too much," he whispered. "It's not too much," Mary replied softly. "It's a scarf. It keeps people warm. That's what it's meant to do." He carefully wrapped it around his neck. The fabric was soft against his skin. It was more than just a scarf. It was kindness. It was care, and he could feel it. The sound of snowplows finally reached them faintly from the distance. The roads were slowly being cleared. It was time. He picked up his boots, now dry and warm, and began putting them on. Mary watched him quietly. It was strange how someone could feel like a stranger one night and like a familiar friend the next morning. But that's how life works sometimes. Unexpected meetings could leave quiet marks on the heart. Before he opened the door, he turned to her. "Mary," he said softly, "I don't know how to thank you. You already did." She said with a warm smile, "You stayed alive. That's thanks enough." He looked at her like he wanted to say something more, but couldn't quite find the words. So instead, he simply hugged her. It wasn't a long hug, just a warm, grateful one, the kind that speaks when words fall short. Mary wasn't used to surprises like this, but she didn't pull away. She hugged him back. When he finally stepped outside, the air was still cold but calm. The snow crunched under his boots. The road stretched out like a white path, quiet and bright. Mary stood at the door, watching him. He turned back once, gave a small wave, and smiled. Then he started walking. Mary watched until he disappeared down the snowy road. She didn't feel sad, exactly. It was something softer, like watching a chapter gently close. She closed the door and returned to the warmth of her cabin. The hours passed slowly after he left. She cleaned up the dishes, folded the extra blanket, and set the scarf drawer aside. Now a little emptier than before. The house felt quiet again, but not in the same lonely way it used to. This quiet had something new inside it, a memory, a reminder. Later in the afternoon, as she sat near the fire knitting, her mind wandered back to the night before. She remembered the knock on the door, the young man with snow on his hair, the way his hand shook when he held the cup of tea, the way his voice softened when he spoke about his sister. She hadn't planned any of it, but that's how life often worked. Unplanned moments became the most meaningful. She thought about her husband's old coat and scarf now out there in the world again, keeping someone warm. For years, those things had stayed folded in a chest, too precious to touch. But now, they were serving their purpose again. It felt right. Evening came, and the sky turned pink over the snowy hills. Mary lit the lantern near her window, the same one Daniel had followed through the storm. She had always lit it out of habit, but now it felt special. She thought, maybe someone else might need its light one day too. The days passed. The snow slowly melted away as the sun returned. Life in the small town went back to its quiet rhythm. But Mary often thought about Daniel. She wondered if he had reached his sister safely. She wondered if the scarf was still wrapped around his neck, keeping him warm wherever he was. One afternoon, about a week later, a soft knock came at her door again. It wasn't as desperate as the one that stormy night. When she opened it, she found a young woman standing there with a shy smile and a warm blanket draped over her shoulders. "Are you Mrs. Mary?" the woman asked kindly. Mary nodded. The woman held out a folded piece of paper. "My brother asked me to give this to you. He said you saved his life." Mary took the paper with gentle hands. She recognized Daniel's handwriting immediately. It was neat but a little rushed. She opened it slowly and read, "Dear Mary, I made it to Lena's house safely. She's doing better now, and we had a warm dinner together. I wanted to thank you again for everything, for opening your door, for the coat, for the scarf, and for the kindness you showed me when I was just a stranger. I won't forget that night. Your light guided me more than just through the snow. It reminded me that there's goodness in this world, even in the coldest storm. With gratitude, Daniel." Mary held the letter close to her chest. Warmth spread through her heart like sunlight. She didn't need anything more than those words. Sometimes, kindness didn't end with a goodbye. It stayed, quiet but